A billionaire's desire for an heir led to an unthinkable proposal. A struggling maid, desperate to save her family, became his only choice. But the betrayal that followed shattered his perfect world. How could someone he trusted so deeply destroy him so completely? The truth will leave you speechless. Marcus Harrington was a man who seemed to have it all. At just 48, he was the owner of one of the most successful investment firms in the country, a self-made billionaire who had climbed to the top through sheer determination and an unmatched work ethic. Yet, behind the polished facade of tailored suits and private jets, Marcus was a deeply lonely man. Years of focusing solely on his career had left no room for relationships or family. He carried himself with an air of authority, but those close to him, if anyone could truly be called close, knew that beneath the surface, there was a void he could never fill. What Marcus longed for, though he'd never admit it, was an heir, someone to carry on his legacy, someone who could give his life a deeper purpose. In stark contrast to Marcus's world of wealth and power was Sofia Alvarez. At 27, she was the sole provider for her family, working tirelessly as a maid in one of Marcus's many luxury properties. Her days were long and grueling, cleaning up after people who barely noticed her existence. But Sofia wasn't bitter, she was determined. With a sick mother to care for and 2 younger siblings who relied on her, Sofia's focus was solely on survival. Dreams of a better life seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of bills, medical expenses, and endless sacrifices. Fate would bring these 2 unlikely individuals together in a moment that would change both their lives forever. One afternoon, while Sofia was cleaning the guest wing of the mansion, Marcus overheard her talking on the phone. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of desperation as she begged a hospital administrator for more time to pay her mother's medical bills. She didn't realize Marcus was listening, but he stood silently, watching her. For the first time in years, he felt something stir, a mix of pity, curiosity, and perhaps a strange sense of connection. Marcus had always been a man of logic and calculated decisions, and in that moment an idea began to form. He saw in Sofia not just a hard-working employee but an opportunity, a solution to his own unspoken problem. She was young, healthy, and driven by an unwavering commitment to her family. Could she be the answer to his quest for an heir? As Sofia hung up the phone, she sighed heavily and wiped away a tear, unaware that Marcus was still standing nearby. He approached her, his voice as cold and commanding as ever. "Miss Alvarez," he said, making her jump slightly in surprise. "I couldn't help but overhear your predicament." His words were measured, almost clinical, but his sharp blue eyes betrayed a flicker of something else. Compassion? Curiosity? Whatever it was, Sofia couldn't quite place it. "Let's just say I have a proposition for you," he continued, his tone softening ever so slightly. Sofia looked up at him, confused but intrigued. She couldn't know it yet, but this brief encounter would set the stage for a series of decisions that would forever alter both their lives. Sofia Alvarez couldn't stop thinking about her brief interaction with Marcus Harrington. She had spent the rest of the day replaying his words in her mind. "I have a proposition for you." What could he possibly want from her? She was just a maid, a small cog in the massive machine of his luxurious life. The idea of him noticing her at all was baffling. Yet, here she was, summoned to his private office, a place she had never stepped foot in before. The room was as imposing as the man himself. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the city skyline, while a massive mahogany desk dominated the space. Marcus sat behind it, his posture straight, his piercing gaze locked on Sofia as she entered. For a moment she felt small, almost insignificant under his scrutiny. "Miss Alvarez," he began, his tone calm but authoritative. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries. I have a very specific offer for you." Sofia's heart raced as she nodded, unsure of what to say. She clasped her hands nervously in front of her, waiting for him to continue. Marcus leaned forward slightly, folding his hands on the desk. I want you to carry my child, he said, his voice devoid of hesitation. The words hung in the air, heavy and shocking. Sofia blinked, certain she had misheard him. Excuse me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll be direct, Marcus continued, ignoring her stunned expression. I've reached a point in my life where I want an heir, someone to carry on my legacy. But I have no interest in marriage or the complications that come with it. I believe you're the perfect candidate. You're young, healthy, and clearly devoted to your family. In return, I'll compensate you generously, enough to ensure you and your family never have to struggle again. Sofia stared at him, her mind racing. Was he serious? This was a man who could have anything he wanted. Why would he choose her for something so personal, so intimate? She opened her mouth to respond but found herself speechless. Marcus seemed to sense her hesitation and continued. I'm offering you $2 million, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. Half up front, the rest upon the birth of the child. Additionally, I'll cover all medical expenses and provide a safe and comfortable environment throughout the pregnancy. You'll have access to the best care money can buy. The number alone made Sofia's head spin. $2 million. It was more money than she could ever hope to see in her lifetime. It could pay for her mother's treatments, put her siblings through school, and finally lift the crushing weight of poverty off her shoulders. But at what cost? This wasn't just a financial transaction, it was her body, her life, her future. Sofia finally found her voice. Mr. Harrington, I don't know what to say. This is overwhelming. I understand, Marcus said, his voice softening slightly. Take the night to think it over. This isn't a decision to be made lightly. He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. But know this, Miss Alvarez. Opportunities like this don't come twice. If you agree, you'll secure a future not just for yourself but for everyone you care about. As Sofia left the office, her thoughts were a whirlwind. The weight of the decision pressed down on her as she walked through the mansion's grand hallways. Could she do this? Could she sacrifice her own plans, her own body, to save her family? And even if she could, what kind of life would she be bringing this child into? That night, Sofia sat in her small, cluttered apartment, staring at the peeling wallpaper and the stack of unpaid bills on the table. Her mother coughed weakly from the bedroom, and her younger brother and sister whispered to each other as they tried to study by the dim light of a single lamp. The reality of her situation was stark, inescapable. Tears welled in her eyes as she weighed her options. On one hand, the proposal felt impossible, even immoral. On the other, it was the lifeline her family so desperately needed. As the hours ticked by, Sofia knew that this decision would change her life forever. By morning, she had made up her mind. Sofia Alvarez had made her decision. When she walked into Marcus Harrington's office the following morning, her heart was racing, but her resolve was firm. She had spent the entire night agonizing over the choice, weighing her doubts against the sheer necessity of her circumstances. In the end, the chance to secure her family's future outweighed her fears. Marcus, seated behind his imposing desk, looked up from a stack of papers as she entered. "I'll do it," Sofia said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Marcus studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable, before giving a curt nod. "Good," he replied. "We'll proceed immediately." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Sofia underwent a battery of medical tests to ensure she was the ideal candidate for surrogacy. True to his word, Marcus spared no expense. The doctors were the best in the field, the facilities state-of-the-art. Sofia was both amazed and overwhelmed by the efficiency of it all. Everything about Marcus's world seemed so cold, calculated, and transactional. It was a stark contrast to her own life, where every decision was driven by emotion and survival. When the procedure was successfully completed, Marcus arranged for Sofia to move into a private wing of his mansion. It was a far cry from her cramped apartment. The suite was luxurious, with plush furniture, expansive windows, and every convenience she could possibly need. But as grand as it was, Sofia couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. The mansion was vast and quiet, and Marcus, true to his nature, remained distant. Their interactions were brief and formal, limited to updates on her health and the progress of the pregnancy. Despite the awkwardness, Sofia couldn't deny that Marcus was true to his word. Her mother's medical bills were paid in full, her siblings enrolled in better schools, and she received a generous monthly stipend. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. But with that hope came an underlying tension she couldn't quite place. As the months passed, Sofia began to notice small, unexpected gestures from Marcus. He would occasionally ask how she was feeling, lingering just a moment longer than necessary to hear her response. Once, she caught him watching her as she rested on the terrace, a look of quiet contemplation on his face. These moments were fleeting, but they hinted at something deeper, a side of Marcus she hadn't seen before. Sofia, too, found herself softening toward him. She couldn't deny the gratitude she felt for what he had done for her family, but it was more than that. There was a vulnerability to Marcus that she hadn't expected. Beneath the stoic exterior, he was a man who had spent his life building walls to protect himself. Sofia, unknowingly, had begun to chip away at them. By the 6th month of the pregnancy, their dynamic had shifted subtly. Marcus started joining Sofia for dinner in the evenings, their conversations moving beyond the formalities of the agreement. They talked about their vastly different upbringings, their hopes, and their fears. For the first time, Marcus opened up about his past, about the family he had lost touch with, the sacrifices he had made to build his empire, and the loneliness that haunted him. Sofia listened intently, her heart aching for the man she had once thought incapable of feeling. But even as their bond grew, an unspoken tension lingered between them. Sofia couldn't forget the terms of their agreement. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. And Marcus, despite his moments of vulnerability, was careful never to cross the line. He was polite, even kind at times, but there was always a sense of distance, a reminder that she was there for a purpose, and that purpose was to provide him with an heir. Then came the night that changed everything. Sofia was sitting in the nursery, a beautifully decorated room that Marcus had spared no expense to create. She ran her fingers over the edge of the crib, imagining the child that would soon fill it. Marcus entered the room quietly, standing in the doorway for a moment before speaking. "You've done more than I could have ever asked for, Sofia," he said softly. "I want you to know that I'm grateful." His words caught her off guard. There was something raw in his voice, something that made her chest tighten. She turned to face him, searching his expression for meaning. But before she could respond, Marcus straightened, the moment slipping away as quickly as it had come. As he left the room, Sofia was left with a mixture of emotions, gratitude, confusion, and a growing sense of unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that, despite their growing connection, something was about to disrupt the fragile peace they had found. What she didn't know was that the storm was already brewing, and the cracks in their carefully constructed world were about to show. The peaceful rhythm of the past months was suddenly disrupted when Marcus received an anonymous message. It was a plain, unmarked envelope left at his office, containing photographs of Sofia meeting with someone Marcus hadn't seen in years. His estranged brother, William Harrington. The sight of his brother, whom Marcus had cut ties with after years of betrayal and rivalry, sent a wave of anger and confusion through him. Why would Sofia, the woman he had trusted to carry his child, be meeting with William? What could they possibly have to discuss? Marcus couldn't let it go. The seed of doubt planted by the photographs grew with each passing day. At first, he tried to dismiss it. Sofia had shown no signs of dishonesty, no indication that she was anything but grateful for the opportunity he had given her. But the timing of William's reappearance was too suspicious to ignore. Marcus decided to investigate further, hiring a private investigator to uncover the truth. The investigation revealed a shocking chain of events. It turned out that William had approached Sofia months before Marcus had even made his proposal. He had discovered Marcus's desire for an heir and saw an opportunity to destroy him where it hurt the most, his legacy. William manipulated Sofia into spying on Marcus, promising her financial help for her family. However, William's true plan was far darker. He intended to use the child as leverage to force Marcus into giving up his business empire. When Marcus later proposed the surrogacy agreement, William seized the chance to infiltrate his brother's life, using Sofia as an unwitting pawn in his scheme. When Marcus learned the full story, he felt a mix of emotions he hadn't experienced in years: betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. Sofia, the woman he had come to trust and even care for, had been in contact with the one person he despised most in the world. Though the evidence suggested that Sofia's involvement was coerced, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. He decided to confront her directly. That evening, Marcus found Sofia sitting in the nursery, gently rocking in a chair as she hummed a soft lullaby. For a moment, he hesitated, watching her in silence. She looked so peaceful, so genuine. Could the woman before him really be capable of such deceit? He stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. "Sofia," he began, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. She looked up, startled not just by his tone but by the raw emotion in his eyes. "How could you?" Sofia frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "How could I what?" Marcus held up the photographs, his hand shaking. "William, my brother, the one person who has spent his life trying to destroy me. How long have you been working with him?" His voice cracked as he spoke, the weight of betrayal evident in every word. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at the images. "Marcus, this isn't what it looks like." "Then explain it to me," he demanded, his tone growing harsher. "Explain why you've been meeting with my brother behind my back." Tears welled in Sofia's eyes as she struggled to find the words. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said finally, her voice trembling. "William approached me before you did. He offered to help my family. I was desperate, Marcus. I didn't know who he was or what he really wanted. I only agreed because I thought it was the only way to save my mother." Marcus's expression hardened. "And yet you never thought to tell me? You kept this from me while living under my roof, carrying my child." "I was afraid," Sofia admitted, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to tell you. And by the time I realized who William really was, it was too late. He threatened me, Marcus. He said he'd ruin everything if I didn't keep quiet." Marcus turned away, his fists clenched at his sides. "You should have come to me," he said, his voice low and filled with disappointment. "I could have protected you. Instead, you chose to betray me." Sofia stood, her tears falling freely now. "I didn't betray you, Marcus. I made a mistake, but I never meant to hurt you. Everything I did was to protect my family. Please, you have to believe me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the soft creak of the rocking chair. Finally, Marcus turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore," he said quietly. "But for the sake of this child, I'll give you the chance to prove yourself. You owe me that much." Sofia nodded, her heart heavy with regret. She knew that rebuilding Marcus's trust would be an uphill battle, but she was determined to make things right. As he left the room, she sat back in the chair, clutching her belly and whispering a silent promise to the child she carried. She would find a way to fix this, no matter the cost. But unbeknownst to both of them, William wasn't finished. He had been watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The storm was far from over. Sofia Alvarez knew she had reached a breaking point. The confrontation with Marcus had left her emotionally drained, but it also gave her clarity. She couldn't continue living in the shadows of secrets and manipulation. If she wanted to protect Marcus, the child, and herself, she needed to take control of the situation, no matter how terrifying the consequences might be. The next morning, Sofia sat down at the desk in her room, her hands trembling as she wrote a letter to Marcus. In it, she poured out the full truth: how William had approached her, how he had used her desperation to manipulate her, and how she had become trapped in his web of deceit. She didn't hold back, admitting her mistakes and taking full responsibility for her actions. But she also emphasized her love for the unborn child and her determination to make things right. She left the letter on Marcus's desk before quietly leaving the mansion. Sofia knew that staying would only put Marcus and the baby in further danger. She needed to face William head-on and put an end to his schemes, even if it meant risking everything. Sofia's first step was to confront William directly. She arranged to meet him at a public cafe, choosing a location where she felt at least somewhat safe. When he arrived, his smirk was as smug as ever, his confidence infuriating. "Sofia," he said smoothly, sitting across from her, "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about our little arrangement." "Enough, William," Sofia said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "I know what you've been doing, and it ends now. You've caused enough damage." William leaned back in his chair, his smirk fading slightly. "And what exactly do you plan to do about it?" he asked, his tone mocking. "Run to Marcus? I doubt he'd believe you after everything I've told him." Sofia took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had. "I'm not here to plead with you, William. I'm here to warn you. If you don't leave Marcus alone, I'll expose everything. I've kept records of every conversation we've had, every threat you've made. If you push me, I'll go to the media. I'll make sure the world knows who you really are." For the first time, William's confidence faltered. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think you can take me down? You're nothing, Sofia. A maid. A pawn. No one will believe you." "We'll see about that," Sofia replied, standing her ground. "I may be a pawn, but even pawns can topple kings." Sofia left the cafe with her head held high, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she had made herself a target, but she also knew she couldn't live in fear any longer. Her next step was to gather the evidence she had promised. Over the past few months, Sofia had saved text messages, recorded phone calls, and even taken photographs of documents William had carelessly left behind during their meetings. She hadn't known at the time how important those small acts of defiance would become. With the evidence in hand, Sofia reached out to a journalist known for exposing corruption. The meeting was tense but productive, and the journalist agreed to investigate further. Within days, a scathing exposé about William Harrington's schemes and manipulations hit the headlines. The article detailed his efforts to sabotage Marcus's reputation, his use of Sofia as a pawn, and his long history of unethical behavior in the business world. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. Marcus was blindsided when the story broke. At first, he didn't know how to feel: betrayed, angry, or relieved. But as he read through the article, he began to see the truth. Sofia's bravery and sacrifice were undeniable. She had risked everything to protect him and their unborn child, even when it meant exposing her own mistakes. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. He tried to reach Sofia, but she had disappeared. Determined to find her, Marcus hired a team to track her down. Weeks turned into months, and though his efforts were relentless, Sofia seemed to have vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, William's downfall was swift and brutal. His reputation was ruined, his business ventures collapsed, and he was forced to flee the country to escape the backlash. During this time, Marcus focused on preparing for the arrival of his son. The nursery was completed, the best medical team was on standby, and Marcus began to reflect on the kind of father he wanted to be. He realized that his pursuit of control and perfection had blinded him to what truly mattered: love, trust, and forgiveness. One rainy evening, months after Sofia's departure, Marcus received a knock on the door. When he opened it, he found Sofia standing there, drenched from the rain, her eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't stay away," she said softly. Not from you. Not from him. Marcus didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the weight of the past months melted away. In that moment, they both knew that their story was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came next together. Months had passed since Sofia returned to Marcus's life, and together they began the delicate process of rebuilding their trust. The arrival of their son, Daniel, had brought them a new sense of purpose, grounding them in the present and giving them hope for the future. Marcus, once cold and distant, found himself transforming into a devoted father, spending his days doting on his newborn and his evenings sharing quiet moments with Sofia. For Sofia, life finally felt like it was coming together. The sacrifices she had made, the pain she had endured, it all seemed worth it as she watched Marcus hold their child with a tenderness she hadn't thought him capable of. Yet, in the back of her mind, there was always a lingering fear that their happiness was fragile, that the shadow of William's betrayal might resurface to haunt them. Her fears were not unfounded. One evening, as Marcus and Sofia sat in the nursery, Daniel peacefully asleep in his crib, Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening as he saw the name, William Harrington. Against his better judgment, Marcus answered. "What do you want, William?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. On the other end of the line, William's voice was uncharacteristically subdued. "Marcus, I made mistakes," he began. "I've lost everything, my business, my reputation, my life as I knew it. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I need you to know. It was never just about the money." "What are you talking about?" Marcus demanded, his patience wearing thin. "It was about Dad," William admitted, his voice breaking. "All those years he favored you, groomed you to take over the business, while I was left in the shadows. I resented you, Marcus. I wanted to hurt you the way I felt hurt, but in the end it only destroyed me." Marcus was silent, the weight of his brother's confession sinking in. He had always known that their father's favoritism had driven a wedge between them, but hearing William say it aloud was something else entirely. "So, what now?" Marcus asked. "Do you expect me to feel sorry for you?" "No," William said quietly. "I just wanted to tell you the truth before I disappear for good. I'm leaving the country. I've made arrangements to start over somewhere far away. I needed you to know why." The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He set the phone down, his mind racing. Sofia, who had been watching him with concern, reached out to touch his arm. "What did he say?" she asked softly. Marcus hesitated, then recounted the conversation. When he finished, Sofia sighed, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. "Maybe this is the closure you both needed," she said. "It doesn't excuse what he did, but at least now you know the truth." As the days turned into weeks, the memory of William's call began to fade, replaced by the demands of parenthood and the quiet joys of their growing family. Marcus and Sofia focused on the present, finding comfort in the simplicity of their new life together. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, bound by the trials they had faced and the love they had found in the most unlikely of circumstances. But life, as they had learned, was rarely so simple. One crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus attended Daniel's first preschool recital. The small auditorium was filled with proud parents and excited children, their laughter and chatter echoing off the walls. Marcus watched from the back of the room, his heart swelling with pride as Daniel took the stage, his tiny voice carrying through the air with surprising confidence. As the recital ended and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus caught a glimpse of a familiar figure near the exit. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but as he moved closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was William, dressed in plain clothes and wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. William stood silently, watching Daniel from a distance. His expression was unreadable. Was it regret, longing, or something darker? He made no move to approach, vanishing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. But as Marcus stood frozen, one thought haunted him. Was William truly gone, or was this just the beginning of something else? For the rest of the evening, Marcus couldn't shake the image of his brother standing there, a ghost from the past haunting the edges of his new life. When he told Sofia about it, she looked troubled but said nothing. They both knew that William's appearance could mean many things: regret, longing, or perhaps a reminder of the scars they all carried. In the end, Marcus chose to focus on what mattered most: his family. He had spent too many years letting the past dictate his present, and he was determined not to make that mistake again. Holding Daniel close that night, with Sofia by his side, he realized that their story wasn't just about betrayal or redemption. It was about resilience, about finding light in the darkness and building a future worth fighting for. The years that followed weren't perfect, but they were theirs. Marcus and Sofia transformed their pain into strength, their betrayal into trust, and their sacrifices into a foundation for a life of love and purpose. Together, they built a home where their son, Daniel, could thrive, a haven born from resilience and redemption. For Marcus, the journey had been transformative. The once cold billionaire, defined by his ambition and isolation, now found joy in the simplest moments: a child's laughter, a shared meal, a quiet evening by the fireplace with Sofia. Sofia, too, had grown in ways she hadn't thought possible. The pain of her mistakes and the courage it took to make amends had shaped her into a woman of resilience and strength. She no longer carried the weight of her past as a burden but as a testament to her ability to rise above even the darkest of circumstances. Her family was no longer just surviving. They were thriving thanks to Marcus's continued support and her unwavering determination. Despite the peace they had found, the memories of William lingered at the edges of their happiness. Marcus often wondered what had become of his brother after that final phone call and the brief, silent appearance at Daniel's recital. He would never admit it out loud, but a part of him hoped that William had found some semblance of redemption, even if it was far away from their lives. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Daniel climbed onto Marcus's lap, clutching a photo album Sofia had put together over the years. The little boy flipped through the pages, pointing out pictures of birthdays, vacations, and quiet family moments. His innocent questions about the past brought a smile to Marcus's face, but one question made him pause. "Daddy," Daniel asked, his wide eyes filled with curiosity, "do you have a brother?" The room fell silent. Sofia glanced at Marcus, her expression soft and understanding. Marcus took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Yes, Daniel," he said finally. "I do have a brother. His name is William." "Why don't we see him?" Daniel asked, his tone innocent and free of judgment. Marcus hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal to a child so young. "Sometimes families can be complicated," he said gently. "William and I had some problems, and we went our separate ways. But that doesn't mean I don't think about him." Sofia placed a comforting hand on Marcus's arm, silently reassuring him. "What's important," she added, addressing Daniel, "is that we always try to forgive and learn from the past. That's how we grow stronger as a family." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, satisfied with the answer, and returned to flipping through the photo album. But the conversation lingered in Marcus's mind long after Daniel had gone to bed. He sat with Sofia by the fire, the warmth of the flames casting a soft glow over the room. "Do you think I'll ever see him again?" Marcus asked quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Sofia considered the question carefully. "Maybe," she said. "But if you don't, I think you've already done what matters most. You've forgiven him in your heart. That's more for you than for him, Marcus." Her words stayed with him, bringing a sense of peace he hadn't felt before. Marcus realized that while his relationship with William might never be mended, the journey they had all endured had brought him to a place of clarity and growth. The pain of the past had given way to the light of the present, and that was enough. As the evening drew to a close, Marcus glanced out the window at the stars scattered across the night sky. He thought about the choices that had brought him here, the mistakes, the sacrifices, the unexpected moments of connection. Life, he realized, was not about perfection or control. It was about the messy, beautiful journey of learning, forgiving, and building something meaningful with the people who mattered most. Holding Sofia's hand, Marcus smiled, content in the knowledge that their story, though imperfect, was theirs, and that was what made it extraordinary. As Marcus and Sofia closed the chapter of their turbulent past, their lives settled into a rhythm of love and gratitude. The lessons they had learned were etched deeply into their hearts, lessons of trust, forgiveness, and resilience. Their journey had been far from conventional, but it was their shared struggles that made their bond unbreakable. For Marcus, every day spent with Daniel and Sofia felt like a gift. The man who once defined himself by power and control now found fulfillment in the small, meaningful moments. Daniel's laughter echoing through the halls, Sofia's gentle encouragement when he faced doubts, and the warmth of their shared family dinners. He had learned that true wealth wasn't found in bank accounts or accolades but in the connections that made life worth living. Sofia, too, had found her strength in ways she hadn't thought possible. The woman who once felt trapped by her circumstances had risen above them, becoming a beacon of resilience and hope. She no longer carried the weight of her mistakes with shame but embraced them as a testament to her ability to overcome. Her family was thriving, her son was happy, and she had built a partnership with Marcus founded on mutual respect and love. But as they moved forward, they knew the scars of the past would always be a part of them. They didn't try to forget the pain, the betrayals, or the sacrifices. It was those very experiences that had shaped them into the people they were today. Instead, they chose to honor their past by using it as a foundation to build a brighter future. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Marcus turned to Sofia. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if things had been different?" he asked softly. Sofia smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember that everything we went through brought us here. And I wouldn't trade this for anything." Marcus nodded, her words resonating deeply. They had faced trials that could have broken them, but instead they had grown stronger. Their story was one of redemption and renewal, proof that even the most fractured lives could be pieced back together into something beautiful. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Marcus and Sofia held hands, silently acknowledging the journey they had traveled. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that made all the difference. Years later, the story of Marcus Harrington and Sofia Alvarez became one that their family cherished, a tale of redemption, resilience, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Daniel, now a young man, often marveled at the strength of his parents, their ability to face unimaginable trials and emerge stronger together. He grew up knowing that his life was built on their sacrifices and unwavering commitment to one another. For Marcus, watching Daniel grow into a kind, compassionate man was the ultimate reward. Every milestone, every achievement, every small moment of joy, was a reminder of how far they had come. He often thought about the choices that had led them here, the risks and mistakes, and the moments of clarity that had changed everything. Those reflections brought him peace, knowing that even the darkest chapters had served a purpose. Sofia, too, found immense pride in their journey. She often told Daniel stories about the hardships they had faced, not to dwell on the pain but to teach him the value of perseverance and the importance of staying true to one's principles. Her love for Marcus had deepened over the years, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared growth. One crisp autumn evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Daniel made an announcement. "I've decided what I want to do with my life," he said, his eyes bright with determination. "I want to protect the legacy you've built, Dad. Not just the business, but the values you've taught me, to fight for what's right, no matter the cost." Marcus and Sofia exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride. They had instilled in their son the values they had fought so hard to uphold, and now, he was ready to carry those values into the world. It was in that moment that they realized their story wasn't just about them, it was a legacy they had passed down, one that would continue to inspire others. As the family laughed and shared stories late into the night, Marcus and Sofia knew one thing for certain. Their journey, though filled with pain and uncertainty, had been worth every step. Together, they had built a legacy of love, one that would endure for generations to come. In the quiet moments of their lives, Marcus and Sofia often found themselves reflecting on how far they had come. The storms they had weathered, the betrayals they had endured, and the sacrifices they had made were no longer sources of pain but symbols of growth and strength. Together, they had built a life that was not perfect, but undeniably theirs, a life filled with love, redemption, and hope. Marcus, once a man driven solely by ambition and control, now understood the true meaning of success. It wasn't in the wealth he had amassed or the power he had wielded, but in the family he had built. Every laugh, every hug, every shared moment with Sofia and Daniel reminded him of the decision that had changed everything, the day he chose to let someone in. Sofia, too, carried the lessons of their journey close to her heart. She had learned that even the most broken paths could lead to something beautiful, as long as she had the courage to keep moving forward. Her love for Marcus, once born out of gratitude and necessity, had blossomed into something deep and unshakable. It was a love built on trust, understanding, and the shared determination to build a better future. As they stood together one evening, watching Daniel play in the garden, Marcus turned to Sofia and said, "I never imagined my life would look like this." Sofia smiled, leaning into him. "Neither did I," she replied, "but I wouldn't change a thing." In the end, their story wasn't about the mistakes they had made or the pain they had endured. It was about the strength it took to heal, the courage to forgive, and the love that carried them through it all.